Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in. My name's Dave Sischo and I coordinate the Snail Extinction Prevention Program for the Hawaii Department of Land and Natural Resources. And big surprise, I'll be talking to you guys today about snails, but specifically on snails from the island of Läna'i and the efforts underway to save them from extinction. So to put this into perspective, the Hawaiian Islands were host to significant land snail diversity with over 750 species in 13 different families. And as you can see from the photos, there is great diversity of form, and in general, they are just pretty spectacular animals. The Hawaiian Islands are 1/1700th the land area of North America, and Hawaii has comparable land snail diversity to that landmass. And so there was incredible numbers of species packed into this very small area. In Hawaii, snails can be found from the forest floor to the canopy and from coastal strand to some of our highest mountains. They are important components of forest ecosystems, increasing nutrient cycling, cleaning plants as they glean algae and fungus from plant surfaces. And they are said by conservation managers to be a canary in a coal mine, as loss of land snails is an early indicator of a problem in an ecosystem. Due mainly to introduced predators at this point, including rats, Jackson's chameleons, and the predatory snail Euglandina rosea, which was introduced in the 1950s as a biocontrol, roughly 50% of the snail diversity that once has been lost to the appetites of these introduced species. Unfortunately, we are planning for the near total extirpation of approximately 10 of our genera in the Hawaiian Islands, and this represents about 100 species within the next 1 to 10 years without significant conservation intervention. The photos show representatives of the most vulnerable genera, and many of these are larger tree snails and ground snails that make nice tasty morsels for things like rats and Euglandina rosea. Due to this extinction crisis, the Department of Land and Natural Resources created the Snail Extinction Prevention Program in 2012, and the main objectives of this program are to prevent the imminent extinction and local extirpation of imperiled land snail species, sync rare snail conservation objectives and management techniques across entities and islands, and to integrate captive rearing with management of wild populations. We currently have a small team on Oahu and a team on Maui, and have a captive rearing facility that maintains 40 species from 5 islands, many of which are extinct in the wild. SEPP and our partners across the state are using surveys to prioritize actions, captive propagation and reintroduction to bolster populations and save really vulnerable populations from extinction, and predator exclusion and predator control when possible out in the field to protect wild populations. Today I'll be talking specifically about land snails on Läna'i, and as most of you know, Maui, Molokai, Läna'i, and Koho'olawe were once one large island called Maui Nui, and consequently the land snail fauna of Läna'i have very closely related lineages on this island group, or the other islands in this group, rather. Historically, there are approximately 50 species documented from Läna'i, representing most of the 13 Hawaiian land snail families. Many of these species are endemic to Läna'i itself. Läna'i has a long history of agriculture and ungulate activity that has significantly altered large portions of the island. However, nice native habitat still occurs on the island's small mountain range, and this is the area where land snails still persist and where the focus of land snail conservation occurs. And I've highlighted this area, or circled this area rather, in yellow. Most of the land snail work on Läna'i prior to recent times occurred in the early 1900s, with a large gap between then and surveys conducted in 1994 and again in 2005 by Dr. Michael Hadfield with the University of Hawaii. His surveys focus specifically on the two extant Partulina species, Partulina semicarinata and Partulina variabilis. The results of these surveys helped to justify listing both species as endangered in 2015 under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. Between 1995 and 2015, the number of Partulina populations and the number of individual snails observed at sites drastically declined. These declines were blamed in part on rat depredation and encroachment of introduced invasive weeds that alter habitat for the snails. And so this brings me to the present day. Since the formation of Pūlama Läna'i, the land management agency on this privately owned island, there has been significant investment in land snail conservation, and this is in the form of surveys, construction of predator-proof fences, and management and monitoring of populations. This partnership has included the Department of Land and Natural Resources, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Pūlama Läna'i, of course, and the Bishop Museum to some extent for their taxonomic expertise. Since 2015, there have been ongoing land snail surveys on the island, and we continue to rediscover species. These data on this slide are from our partners, Dr. Young and Dr. Hayes at the Bishop Museum, who are conducting a large-scale land snail biodiversity survey across the islands. For many years, the focus has been on the large Partulina species, and they are the only ones listed, but we now know there are quite a few other species persisting on Läna'i. And let's see, these species that are labeled as SPA and with a number are as yet unidentified to the species level. They're typically microsnails, and it takes a lot of work to figure out what they are, and some of them may actually be new to science. Notable rediscoveries include Auriculella lanaiensis, which is the little snail in the lower right-hand picture, and Pleuropulma in the lower left. Both genera are very rare across the islands wherever they occur, and it's pretty neat and important that they're still persisting on Läna'i, and we have the opportunity to intervene in their extinction. Unfortunately, in 2018, after never being documented on the island, Euglandina rosea was found in abundance in Läna'i City. While we don't think they are on the mountain yet, it is definitely a matter of time. Most land snail species will not persist in the presence of this predator, and so there's kind of a dark looming cloud on the island. Thankfully, though, in the past 2 years, 2 predator-proof fences have been constructed on the mountain. This is huge progress. These fences have barriers that keep all predators out. Pā Kāhuli number 1 protects a population of Partulina variabilis, and as a bonus also has Auriculella lanaiensis inside. Pā Kāhuli number 2 protects one of the last known populations of Partulina semicarinata, and I'm happy to report that some of the recent counts of these protected populations have yielded some of the highest numbers yet, which indicate we're on a really good trajectory. Future work on the island includes further surveys to locate remnant populations of all the target species, possibly more fence units, translocation of vulnerable populations into the existing fence units and or into the captive rearing facility for eventual reintroduction into the wild. And I wanted to talk to you folks today specifically about this public-private partnership because I think it highlights an example of a successful conservation effort whereby efficiencies are created and duplication of effort is reduced, and really this partnership has allowed effective conservation to happen. In general, the public aspect of this, the Department of Land and Natural Resources and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have provided technical expertise in snail conservation and placement of predator-proof fencing. We've provided training and monitoring assistance, surveying, and in general, we've accepted the legal responsibility for any actions that involve a permit, such as translocations, collection for captive rearing, etc. The private part of this partnership, Pūlama Läna'i, has thankfully provided funding for construction of fences and continued maintenance of those fences. They've been able to conduct non-intrusive monitoring, including population counts, and have provided land access to our state and Bishop Museum partners, and logistical support to us when we're on island. While snails occur in relatively small, discrete locations on all islands, their populations are spread across the landscape and across property boundaries. For us, the writing is on the wall. Many of our remaining land snail species will not persist without significant conservation intervention, and we're talking about, we have the next 1 to 5 years to intervene before it's almost too late. And so we have a lot of work to do. Over the next decade, we estimate we will need around 50 predator-proof fences to safeguard the remaining diversity in the islands. So this is bigger than any one entity, and we really need partnership. Private landowners hold significant land snail resources and conservation potential. Additionally, there are funding opportunities for partnership conservation efforts. In this example with Pūlama Läna'i, we are very fortunate that the landowner is willing and able to invest resources and staff time and funding to construct these fences. However, looking at future partnerships, the possibilities are quite variable depending on the situation, and include everything from simply facilitating or granting land access and possibly logistical support to actual fence maintenance or funding for fences. So there's a lot of ways this could work, and in some instances the roles could be reversed. And on that note, I'd just like to give a shout out to all of our many partners across the state. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in, and I'll take any questions you have at this point.